The refugees of the Middle East are on the move again, fleeing from the bombs and shells of an advancing army. The people of Lebanon, innocent civilians whose country is now a war front. By last week, at least 200,000 refugees had left their homes with nowhere to go except somewhere else. These are the latest victims of a conflict which began 30 years ago, when refugees from a Holocaust who were Jews made refugees of a nation which was Arab. For 30 years there's been war in the Middle East, and the Lebanon is the latest battlefield. As always, the refugees are frightened, confused and angry.
Whereabouts? هلا بنموت وبعد شوي بنموت ما بنعرف اي ساعه بتجي القذيفه علينا. هيدا هو هيك الطائرات. الطيارات. اسرائيل بطياراتها ودباباتها لم نتخلى عن الشعب الفلسطيني لو ما بقي مننا ولا اي طفل. ولم نتخلى.
They shared southern Lebanon with Palestinians, refugees and fighters.
Support the Palestinians.
Yes. Arab كله سوا سيموت.
They are the victims of Israel's war with the PLO, which represents the people of Palestine. Now they're torn between rage at Israel and contempt for an Arab world which has ignored their plight.
The Israelis.
Nobody is coming to help us. We have no bread, no food, not even water, no electricity, nothing. We are alone. We have nothing. We need everything, you see. We need help. Where is the Arab soldier? Where is the arm? Where is the 100 million of the people? We are the biggest country in the world. We can say that in the Middle East. We are 100 million
the Arab
of
people.
the people. The Arab people, yes. And now, at this moment, we are alone. You see, we are only few thousand, few people, few civil people. And we get the airplane and the tanks and armed ship. Everybody, Israel also, they are using everything to destroy the people. And now, if you like to come with me, I will show you where is the airplanes that are shooting the people. Exactly, you can see with your eyes, you see? That's what I like you to prove that to all the people, to all the world. We are in south of Lebanon alone. And we have no fucking government. I'm telling you that frankly now.
The southern city of Tyre last week. Here, Israel waged war by remote control with sophisticated weapons. But the enemy lived among the people, so hitting the enemy meant hitting the people, unless they fled first. Until the Israeli invasion, there were 40,000 inhabitants of Tyre. Now it is all but deserted, except for the fighters of the PLO, the guerrilla army which Israel had vowed to wipe out. To that end, the mightiest military power in the Middle East had launched a massive assault on South Lebanon. But the guerrillas were elusive. As the Israelis advanced, the Palestinians rushed into retreat, only to regroup into small raiding parties to harass the advancing forces. And since the Israelis never cut the road north, most of the PLO guerrillas escaped. Sidon, 25 miles up the coast from Tyre. The wounded from the front arrive for emergency treatment. The usual casual carnage of war. Shrapnel from airstrikes and artillery fire, daily death. The Sidon morgue filled with refrigerated corpses awaiting relatives. Slivers of sharp metal ripping hundreds of bodies apart.
Here. 2 cats.
And shrapnel is indiscriminate, so women and children lose legs and arms as well. Most of the 1,000 people killed in the 8-day war were civilians who took no part in it. No more than 1 in 4 of those who died were fighters. The Israelis and the Palestinians each insist that the UN is there only to control the other. And the UN has little power. These men are armed only for self-defense, and they wait uneasily to find a role. The Palestinians say that the job of the UN is simply to get Israel's army out, not to stop the guerrillas going south. So it's the unenviable and perilous task of these men somehow to insert themselves between the lines of 2 bitter enemies.
We hope there will be no troubles with the United Nations troops. We will not have clashes with them. We will try to make their job easy, as long as they respect our right.
And what is your right, as you see
Well,
it?
we have an agreement with the Lebanese government, the Cairo agreement. We have certain rights according to that agreement. We hope the United Nations forces would respect that.
Does that mean that you expect to go back into South Lebanon and carry on?
We didn't go out. We didn't go out from the south of Lebanon. And we are now sitting in the south of Lebanon. We are not in the north of Lebanon.
Are you seriously, in practical terms, saying, as someone centrally involved in the military operations here in the south, that they are not affected by the Israeli invasion that's taken place, that you will still be able to function in the same way in future?
Well, if it is for the Israelis, then we can still go on. But now, with the existence of the United Nations forces, things would be slightly different. So we have to wait and see. But to settle this question with you, I tell you with all the honesty, if you tear a Palestinian into pieces, each piece would resist and fight and would go on fighting. We feel that it's not only our will is God's will. And there's no question about that. We will go on fighting, even if they send us to a planet, a different planet. We will go back to our country.
The Israeli invasion of Lebanon began in the early hours of the 15th of March. After a week's fighting, Israel had captured almost all of South Lebanon except the city of Tyre up to the edge of the Litani River, an area of 500 square miles or more. The other side of the war, the border between Israel and Lebanon, barbed wire, electric fence, electronic surveillance along the entire front. The invasion was announced as a security exercise to protect Israel's northern flank. But for many months, the PLO had not even tried to infiltrate Israel from here, and rocket attacks were sporadic. There was more at stake than securing the borders. The generals said that Israel would only clear a zone 6 miles deep, but the politicians announced they would wipe out the PLO. Just beyond the border, the Israelis have allies, the Phalangists, an extreme right-wing militia which controls the Christian villages dotted along Lebanon's southern edge. Here, the Allies relax in victory. Their partnership blossomed in Lebanon's civil war when Israel supported the Christian right against the Muslim and Palestinian left. When the civil war moved south, Israel supplied the beleaguered Phalangists with arms and supplies, anxious to keep the left and the Palestinians at bay. What is your relationship with the Israelis? Is it one of tactics, or is it more than that?
Oh, we are friends, and now just like one family.
One family?
Yeah.
You don't mind the Israelis occupying Lebanon?
No, of course. We want here a strong soldier because there is too much terrorists. And the UN.
The UN?
Yeah, the UN, I don't think they are too much. Just 3,000, you see. It doesn't, it's not enough.
If there is UN forces here, what do you think will happen in the future?
I think all the terrorists will come back.
Are you feeling better now than you were feeling 1 week ago?
Of course. Before now, you can't stand like this. They will shoot you. Like this.
Beyond the Christian villages were the Palestinians. To defeat them, the Israelis were obliged to drive an entire population out of the region. The centre of Bin Jbeil is in ruins, a Muslim town where Palestinians lived and moved in freedom. Here, as in many other places, the Air Force obliterated hundreds upon hundreds of innocent homes which might have hidden a PLO guerrilla. This was a blitzkrieg. In 1 week, the invasion brought a scale of destruction to South Lebanon, which was to dismay many citizens of Israel when they discovered what had been done in their name. And as always, war makes enemies of neutrals.
When he heard the shots, he went out to see who is shooting. Now he didn't see
This man is Lebanese. His father died in the battle for Bin Jbeil. According to the son's account, the old man decided to appease the Israelis by making them coffee on their arrival.
He stand the coffee in his hand and he stand out and waved to them like this with his pajama. So the tank was going up, we turned around the gun and shot him. I didn't believe that he did, but I saw him went inside the house. After they announced for people to come out, I called him from there 2-3 times, he could not answer. So when they brought us here, I took excuse and went. I told them something happened to my father. They told me to go see him. I went and see him dead. The coffee, the blood mixed together on the floor.
The responsibility for the military operation in Lebanon lies with General Weizmann, Israel's Minister of Defense, the most powerful man in the cabinet after the Prime Minister, Mr. Begin. Do you know how many Lebanese civilians were killed in the last invasion?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it's very difficult for us to assess in shellings and bombings that unfortunately happened. But I would like you to realize what some of the things that happened there. The terrorists, from their point of view, I suppose they have no alternative, but they could have found another alternative, lived in villages and in civilian houses. We had a case where white flags were flown in one village, and our soldiers drove in, were shot at, and 3 were killed. So first of all, I would like to say here that we weren't very happy on some of the techniques that we had to employ. But to your specific question, I really wouldn't know. I would imagine that a fair amount, 200, 300, but I really wouldn't like to give a number.
A very great many more civilians, women and children amongst them, infants amongst them, were killed. A very great many more than were killed in the raid on Tel Aviv by the Palestinians.
My dear friend, we didn't go to measure blood for blood. We didn't go and say we lost 30, therefore we're going to kill eye for eye or tooth for tooth. The operation is an unfortunate one. The existence of the terrorists in Lebanon is tragic and unfortunate one. Most of the Arab countries have done themselves a very comfortable situation by kicking them all out to Lebanon and not preventing them from operating from South Lebanon. I can only be extremely sorry, and I say sincerely and candidly, on the unfortunate things that happen to civilians and unfortunate things that happen to lots of people. But therefore, perhaps the civilized world, the UN, the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Egyptians, will come to a conclusion one day that the existence of the PLO, with its tactics and techniques and plans, as I've said, has ruined Lebanon, and if they're not careful, is going to ruin the little bit that is left of it.
I am sorry to say that your mass media, the Western mass media, always beside the Israelis. Your baby in this area. And you are forgetting completely this organized terrorism, even in the United Nations Security Council. You refuse to condemn this barbarian attack on the South, but you bless it. And you said that we accept the raid, but it was a little bit more than required. I have to ask those who used to speak about human rights. Where is this human rights there in the South? Did you see the picture there? Our camps, Lebanese villages who had been smashed completely, some of these villages had been smashed with Phantom, with Skyhawk, with Mirage, with F-15, with Cancer bomb, with Lance rocket, with the Navy. Civilian war, yes, because it is your baby who did it. It is Israel who did it.
The military logic of invasion was insistent. Whether Israel secretly hoped to revive old Zionist dreams about southern Lebanon, or whether the purpose was simply to drive out the PLO, the armed forces pushed deeper and deeper into Lebanon. Until, to the consternation of their Western allies, the Israeli flag was raised but a few miles from the old city of Tyre. There, Israel halted and promised to withdraw on the right terms.
So we moved into the south, also intending to kill as many as we can and destroy as many of the bases as they have, and then asked the civilized world whether they have a solution. Presently, there is a suggested solution that is in the process of in the making. We'll see how it operates. If it's successful, very nice. If not, we'll have to take into account the results.
If the Palestinians remain south of the Litani, will you still withdraw completely out of Lebanon?
There are no Palestinians south of the Litani except in the Tyre area now.
If they remain there, will you withdraw right out of the Lebanon?
We shall withdraw when the United Nations forces take over and take responsibility that no military action is taken against us from South Lebanon.
How long will it be, do you think, judging now, before you are out of South Lebanon?
I hope that as soon as possible. I hope that within 3 weeks, a maximum of 4 weeks.
But the PLO does not accept the principle of ceasefire against Israel. Moreover, Yasser Arafat intends to return to the south.
For me, I can't say, or I can't accept for ceasefire, as they are still there in the south. And I will continue fighting till they will withdraw from the south.
Does that mean that once they are out of the south, you will be in to do whatever you were doing there before, training, etc., in exactly the same way as before? Or will the UN be there, and will they be able to stop you doing what you want, or do you respect their right to stop you? What's your feeling about that?
We have to understand what is the task of this United Nations forces. It is to control the withdrawal of the Israelis from the south. Not to forget that our existence in this area due to an agreement, or many agreements between us and the Lebanese authorities. It's very important. So we are there due to this agreement. And According to this, it is our right to return back.
You expect the situation that existed before the invasion to become again the situation in the future?
Why not?
The Israelis hope not, and they have a plan. By driving the PLO out of the south, they squeeze the guerrillas into a narrow belt bordering the territory controlled by the other army of occupation in Lebanon, the Syrians. Are you worried that you are going to be squeezed into a sandwich, in the middle of a sandwich between the Syrians on the one side controlling you or trying to control you, and on the other side the Israelis trying to control you?
I'm not worried. First of all, you have to understand that the Syrians are my brothers. They are my allies in many branches. They are my brothers, and we and the Syrians in one trench against one enemy for the same purpose.
Have the Syrians made it clear to you that there will be no further restraint on military maneuvers, military activities?
Definitely, we are not in a position to speak frankly or to speak loudly what I am dealing or speaking with the Syrians.
Can I ask you slightly differently then, in a way in which you can answer it? Do you have anxieties that the Syrians might feel obliged under the present circumstances to ask you to restrain?
I didn't think that there will be any circumstances what you are mentioning for.
You don't expect further restraint?
What's for?
Do you expect the Syrians to prevent the Palestinians moving south? And if they don't, will you regard that as a justification for another invasion?
Another what?
Another invasion.
Well, it wasn't an invasion, come on. It's not an invasion. We walked in and we're walking out. But if you want to call it an invasion, you're welcome. But we do hope that the Syrians and the UN and the Lebanese official authorized forces will realize in the very near future that the PLO is detrimental for the peaceful being of Lebanon.
And if not?
We shall discuss the problem when the not comes along.
For a moment, the crisis of a new occupation served to divert the world's attention from the broader crisis of other occupations, the occupation of Egyptian territory in the Sinai, the occupation of Syrian territory in the Golan Heights, and most intractable of all, the occupation of the West Bank of the River Jordan, all territory taken by Israel in the Six-Day War more than 10 years ago. It was occupied territory which last week led to a breakdown in talks between Israel's Prime Minister Menachem Begin and President Carter. Begin returned from America to an anxious and critical country to defend his refusal to withdraw from the occupied West Bank. The Americans know that without this, there can be no settlement in the Middle East. But Begin was unyielding, claiming once more with messianic fervor that the West Bank is part of Israel to be settled by the Jews.
The talks in Washington were difficult talks. We faced several demands which we could not accept.
The Americans are particularly incensed with Mr. Begin because of his assertion that the West Bank is not occupied, that UN Resolution 242 calling for withdrawal from occupied territories does not even apply there. On this, Mr. Begin stands alone in the world of nations, and the Americans fear that his obduracy will drive the Middle East once more towards war.
Great friend and ally. But the representatives of Israel, the foreign minister, and I and our advisors felt deeply that we are dealing with matters concerning the future of the nation and the lives of our children. In every conversation, we felt this difference. To everyone else, including the United States government, the problems on the agenda are of policy, important policy. To us, they are problems of life, of existence, and of making sure our future.
Nablus, an Arab town in occupied territory, in the West Bank, where for 10 years 700,000 Palestinians have lived under martial law, Mr. Begin claims that occupation secures Israel from destruction. The Americans offer an alternative security, buffer zones treaties. Israel prefers occupation. The people here are ruled by an alien army. In the West Bank, Israel challenges the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the Palestinians see in the PLO their only hope of salvation. Did the people here feel that the PLO in the Lebanon was fighting for the people of the West Bank?
Yes, we have a feeling, and it's a fact, that they are fighting for the Palestinian existence, for the Palestinian people, you see. It's not for us, not for them, but for all of us as Palestinians, you see, for our right, for a homeland, you see. The Jews have had their homeland, they have their own state. Okay, but we want our state as well.
Do you regard the guerrilla fighters in the Lebanon as your fighters?
Yes, they are Palestinians, you see, and the PLO is our representative, so all their resources are ours, of course.
For the moment, it is quiet in the West Bank. But last week there were violent demonstrations against Israel's invasion of Lebanon. And the young, who stand in the front line against the occupation, suffered severe reprisal at the hands of the army. But among these Palestinians, the prestige of the PLO has never been higher, and their hatred for the army of Israel never fiercer. Mr. Begin's offer of local autonomy in the West Bank under continued Israeli occupation is more strongly rejected than ever.
About local autonomy and local leadership to represent the Palestinians, the Israelis have been trying to do this for a while, but this is not acceptable to us. This is unacceptable because we feel that the problem is not only ours, it is the problem of the Palestinians. We have the Palestinians who are homeless, living outside the occupied territories, and we cannot claim that it is our own problem here, and then we can negotiate with the Israelis on behalf of everybody. On what to negotiate? As long as there is no solution for the Palestinians, it means that there will be no peace. So nobody will achieve peace without solving the Palestinian problem, because it is the core of the problem.
Unless the PLO is suppressed, of course.
Even though, I mean, we are not prepared to negotiate for something short of a Palestinian state and homeland, you see. So whether the PLO is suppressed or not, but the Palestinians are there.
Just to tell us, back to 67 with minor modification, it will not work. It will not work with the majority of the Israelis, not only with my party, but even parties that do not form presently the coalition government.
Isn't it this government position which has made your best friends, the Americans, say that really there's not much point in talking anymore to Mr. Begin?
No, I don't know whether they said so. I don't think they said so. There's a lot of misrepresentation and misquoting of what the president has just denied what he said. But I would like to point out one thing, and I hope my American friends will not be cross. It's high time they did look into the policy and find out whether this standing on a firm pressure like they did will bring peace or bring crisis. I think it'll bring a crisis, which we're presently right in the midst of it.
Minister, do you believe that the West Bank is part of the State of Israel and should so remain, or that if the conditions were right, Israel should withdraw from the West Bank?
I think that the whole problem is being tackled too black and white like. And I'm not avoiding the issue, but I'd like to elaborate a little bit. First of all, I tackle it from a security point of view. Nobody in Israel wants or will let the borders be 8 miles from the sea as they used to be before 67. Therefore, I think it's a grave mistake for anyone to tell us back to 67 with minor modifications.
Does that mean that you believe that Resolution 242, calling for withdrawal from occupied territories, with Mr. Begin, do you believe that it does not apply to the West Bank?
No, first of all, I don't tackle 242. Just think. Look, if you let me elaborate a little bit more. When the Egyptians come and say that the Sinai is sovereign part of Egypt, they have a legal right to say so because the Sinai was always part of Egypt. We can discuss with them and argue with them that if after 30 years of battles and wars we need certain security measures, this airfield, that airfield, we'll discuss, we'll come to a conclusion. If ever the Syrians come and say the Golan Heights are sovereign part of Syria, they have a legitimate right, we shall discuss with them whether after 30 years and security problems it goes back to Syria or not. Western Bank was never sovereign part of Jordan. It was never sovereign part of Israel either. Gaza was never sovereign part of Egypt.
Does that mean that
that means that both Gaza and the Western Bank are completely different to the Sinai and the Golan. Therefore, you cannot take a scheme and by black and white say, since there is a decision, everything back to 67 minor modification, therefore it applies to everything. I think that it definitely applies to all parts, but every part should be discussed separately when a discussion will happen, I hope, in the future.
But the pressure from the Americans, which has caused the great problems you now have with the United States, has been to recognize that you have to withdraw from the West Bank, given certain guarantees.
I think that I don't know what, I wouldn't like to go into what happened in Washington in the last few days, but I believe that if we sit with the Egyptians facing each other, with nobody helping us, that we'll just sit and us be facing an Egyptian leader like I'm facing you, and I've done it about 5 times already. I think there's a possibility if we don't go into all the legalistic details of this, that, or the other, I think that there is a chance of coming to an understanding. I might be wrong, but I think that we should give it a chance.
That would be a peace just between yourselves and the Egyptians?
If it's impossible to get what is known as a comprehensive peace treaty, I'd rather have something than nothing.
If you could get a comprehensive peace treaty which involved withdrawal from the West Bank, would you withdraw?
We have said, and we keep saying, in any arrangement, Israel stays in the Western Bank, especially from a military point of view.
And the West Bank is the key, because there live the hopes of the Palestinians. And so the crisis over the West Bank is inseparable from the crisis in the Lebanon. Israel has now been in occupation here for 2 weeks, her withdrawal not yet begun, threatening to stay if Palestinians keep up the attack. Israel has always feared destruction, but argues from strength, seeking security in occupation. But that means land without peace, a choice that is only made when you know that the massed armies of your enemy would collapse before your military might. The Palestinians are hardly an army, but they are still there, grouped a mere mile from the Israeli front line, ready to fight. The PLO is not wiped out, and their morale is high. They have demonstrated as never before that there can be no peace in the Middle East which ignores their claim to Palestine, and their will is eternal.
We are homeless. As long as we are homeless, we will go on fighting. They want to liquidate our cause. They want to liquidate our personality as a people. They want to turn us into Red Indians, but we will not turn into Red Indians. We are Palestinians, we lived in Palestine, we are born in Palestine, and why should I, who is born in Palestine, live as a refugee all over the world, and Menachem Begin, who is not a Palestinian, and who was born somewhere in Europe, live in my own home. We will not be finished as a people, on the contrary. We were, we are, we shall always be.
In the Lebanon, the new refugees dig through the rubble of war in search of their dead. For 30 years in the Middle East, there's been conflict, endless destruction and death. Now peace is once more in retreat, while two peoples, the Arabs of Palestine and the Jews of Israel, fight for the same land, a land without peace.